presentations in the concurrent sessions as well as in the plenary sessions. Today we're continuing with a round of concurrent sessions. In this room A, we're going to be focusing on electricity supply and the future of fossil fuels in a decarbonizing world. We have about 6 papers outlined to be presented in this room. We're merging concurrent session 8 and concurrent session 10. In room B, we have socioeconomic dimensions and geopolitics of energy and environment. While in room C, we're going to have technological solutions to enhance the green economy. So we're merging sessions 8 and 10 here in this room, and I hope we'll be done very shortly. I hope we enjoyed the dinner yesterday. Yes. For everyone who has come this morning, it may have been a struggle waking up, but I'm glad to see everyone here. I want to acknowledge a member of council who is here seated, Dr. Margaret Hilili. You're welcome. Yes. Just 1 minute. Okay, we're going to be starting. I think you can sit down. We're going to be starting very shortly. I have one of our presenters and a member of the rapporteur subcommittee. He will be presenting. It's my pleasure to introduce myself. My name is Gashon. I'm from Covenant University. I also serve as the editor of the Nigerian Association for Energy Economics. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning. So the first concurrent session this morning is focusing on electricity supply and the future of fossil fuels in a decarbonizing world. What our focus will be this morning is asking ourselves, yes, the world is decarbonizing. Many countries are looking to reduce CO2 emissions. However, electricity supply is fundamental to economic growth. Electricity supply is essential for pleasurable living, enjoying leisure, having the air conditioning, working. However, for countries that own fossil fuels like Nigeria, Angola, Cameroon, the question then is, how do they balance the need for electricity supply and the desire to decarbonize? That's the key question that is being asked. So in the sessions we'll be listening to this morning, we would focus on how electricity supply dynamics could affect economic growth, and then viewing all of that in the context of decarbonizing. The world wants to leave fossil fuels. Nigeria has a lot of fossil fuels. African countries have fossil fuels that they are dependent on. Even with the dependence on fossil fuel, many of the countries do not have sufficient electricity supply. The question then is, in pursuing decarbonization, how do we then ensure there is sustainable electricity supply? That's a fundamental question which we're hoping we're going to address in this concurrent session. Please, I want to invite everyone to engage actively to ensure that we optimally utilize the time we have. The first speaker will be Mr. Ode Emmanuel Ofana. You'll be presenting. Emmanuel is from CPIL, University of Ibadan. He'll be presenting on energy security or climate concern, a case study of the EU's energy transition agenda and its implication for Nigeria's oil export future. In other words, he's saying if the EU is moving away from fossil fuel and Nigeria depends on oil for its export revenue, then what will be the implications for Nigeria? We're expecting that Nweze Paul will also present on electricity supply dynamics and economic growth in Nigeria. We're also expecting that Oludayo Orolu will be presenting on assessing the performance of the Nigerian electricity supply industry in the post-privatization era. We look forward to having Frank to present on reforms and performance of the electricity sector in Africa. Please, if you're presenting and you came in late, you can just go straight to the technical team to have your slides put on their system. So let's make welcome Mr. Emmanuel Ode. Please come forward, Mr. Emmanuel. Let's make him welcome. Mr. Emmanuel Ode. Please, you can take the seat. I usually call this the hot seat. Let's make him welcome, please. Emmanuel, if the clicker is not working, we can use the keyboard. So don't worry. We're trying to make optimal use of our time. So you just introduce yourself and then you can take the stage to do your presentation. Is that okay? Okay. Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Ode from the Department of Petroleum, Energy Economics and Law, University of Ibadan. So can I?
Please, let's motivate him this morning. The first person presenting.
Okay. As I said, the first slide, please. Okay. I'm here to present a paper titled Energy Security or Climate Concern, a case study of the EU's energy transition agenda and its implication for Nigeria's oil exports. Next slide. Okay. As we all know, the world is a general consensus that the world should leave fossil-based energy sources to renewables because of its inherent threats to human existence in terms of global warming, and like in terms of global warming, climate change and the rest. So people, governments, NGOs, private individuals have all based their call for this move on climate concern. Like they are like, okay, it's not that if not that fossil fuel, because on a normal base, fossil fuels are more reliable. They are cheaper than renewables, but we just cannot continue with them because the war, like it's a threat to the world because it releases carbon and all to cause global warming and all of that. So we have to leave fossil-based sources to renewables, and they have all tied their reason for this transition on the dangers that fossil fuels poses to the globe, to the environment, and some key players have stood as champion for this transition, and countries such as the EU, the United States of America have stood as champion, leading others to move from fossil-based sources to renewables. But most of the times, as we've witnessed, like their commitments are not consistent. Like whenever whenever their commitment tends to pose a threat to their energy security, they tend to go back. They tend to fall back, and that could be seen from what happened recently during the escalation of Ukraine-Russia war, where because of EU stance with Ukraine, Russia had to cut supply of gas to Western Europe, and they had to fall back, not even to, like, they did not even care to even hide it, like to say, okay, maybe let's just endure a bit, or go or source for fuel or gas from other places. They went back to coal, like coal, not even gas, like they went back to coal. So next slide, please. A researcher like myself, like, I was curious, like, is it really that this movement, this transition that they are shouting, singing, like, is it really that? Is it really about the environment? Like, is it really about the environment? So I asked myself, okay, because evidence suggests that often evidence suggests that because Nigeria relies the EU, and because the EU is a trade partner with Nigeria, and Nigeria more than 70% of Nigerians' foreign exchange earning comes from crude exports, and the EU is a major trade partner with Nigeria. So it poses a risk of our revenue stability, because whenever the EU likes, like, whenever they feel like going to coal, like, then our revenue increases. Whenever they don't want, like, whenever they are secured and they don't want fossil fuels, then our revenue tends to drop. So that's that. Next slide. So the research question is it climate change or energy security that really drives EU's energy agenda? What are the implications for Nigerians' oil exports? How can Nigeria adapt strategically? Next slide. Okay, the research objective is 1, to identify the primary driver of EU energy transition. Number 2, examine the impact on Nigerian oil exports. 3 points, risk and opportunities for Nigeria. And number 4, recommend strategic ways that we can respond. Next slide. Okay. There are a couple of theories that my research is based on. Number 1 is the dependency theory. This theory tells us how developing countries like Nigeria is vulnerable to EU's to developed countries, just like the EU, like how we are vulnerable to their because we depend on them, we tend to be vulnerable. Number 2 is the realist theory. This theory tells us why the EU would always prioritize self-interest. Next slide. Okay. Empirical evidence shows that there's been a declining revenue, as I have earlier said. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. The methodology that I adopt for this research is a quantitative case study. Here, the EU is analyzed as the main case study here, driving energy policy, and Nigeria being the dependent case where EU's energy policy influences. Okay, sources, data sources I got my data from EU policy documents such as the Green Deal, the REPA EU, and trade data between Nigeria and EU oil export is analyzed between between 2010 and 2014 to see the pre and post impact of EU's policy on our trade volume. Next slide. Expected outcome of the research. Number one, the EU's transition is not purely climate driven. Energy crisis, this is the Russia-Ukraine war, dominates, like from the thematic analysis that will be done on those documents. It is expected that teams, energy security and climate concern team would dominate energy security team. Number two, Nigerian oil exports show declining trend in EU markets. It poses a risk on our revenue stability. Next slide. Okay. Strategic ways that we can adapt to whatever their policy would do is to diversify our economy beyond crude, invest in renewable and gas markets, strengthen institutional and policy frameworks, forge new trade partnership, leverage EU funding / partnership for transition. Next slide. Conclusion. As I've earlier said, their agenda is not strictly climate driven. It is dual, their energy security and climate, but climate actually dominates. And Nigeria is highly, based on that, Nigeria is highly exposed to our revenue fluctuations. Okay, we should adapt. Essential for we should adapt to the evolving market trends in order to survive. Balance risk with opportunity. Balancing risk with opportunity is key. Next slide. Thank you.
Okay, let's clap for him some more. I was told there's someone who's presenting next. Please, can you save your PowerPoint and give it to them in the studio? Let's make Emmanuel feel welcome. Yes. So Emmanuel, we're going to take comments. You can sit down. We'll take questions. Emmanuel has presented on the topic energy security or climate concern, a case study of the EU's energy transition agenda and its implication for oil exports, Nigeria's oil export future. We listened to him and he concluded with a few points there. Let's give him questions, contribution, suggestions on improving the paper. Suggestions, questions. I think this is a very important issue Maul has addressed. Let's comments, please. Yes, she's raising her hand. You can give her the microphone. Please, can you make your PowerPoint available because we're running for time. The plenary should start by 10.
Good morning.
Yes, your name, your affiliation, and your question, please.
I'm Dr. Princess Wanko. I'm from University of Ibadan. I'm also Deputy Director of Center for Petroleum and Energy Economics and Law, CIPIL, UI. I think your topic is very interesting, but I wanted to see more. I'm hoping you can still put in more. I need to see the drivers that is informing your conclusion. What, apart from one of the examples you gave on the war for which EU allowed people to use coal or something. I wanted for you to give further examples, 2 or 3 bases for which you want to draw a conclusion. I felt that you didn't dwell much on what you did, on bringing out the meat from the bones. So I think you may want to add more information to that. And I want you to give a stronger conclusion than you gave. I wanted you to tie your conclusion to the topic to be sure that you have achieved the objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more comments? Okay, I agree very much with all you said, Dr. Princess, and I think, you know, one of the reasons why these concurrent sessions are held is to build capacity. Yes. So, Emmanuel, please see how you enhance the quality of the paper. For those who may not be aware, we already have a special issue of an international journal that will be receiving some of our papers and considering them for publication. Emmanuel, I think that your slides could have been better. The fonts are really tiny. I'm looking at them from my MacBook. They still look very tiny. I'm wondering if those who were watching on the screen really saw what you presented. So see how you try and enhance the paper. My second comment is that you went straight from empirical evidence, literature review to you did not tell us where you got the data from and what sort of analysis you did. Okay, sorry, you told us the data, but you didn't tell us what you did. Quantitative case study plus quantitative data analysis. Perhaps you could have expanded on that a bit more. Okay, please, but that's a very good piece of work he's worked on, looking at how the EU's climate change strategy has implications for Nigeria's oil export future. Let's appreciate him. Thank you, Manuel. Yes, you have something else. Yes, okay, Dr. Meg has something else. Are you ready to present, please?
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. Please, you can come forward.
Yeah, Mr. Day, that was a good attempt. Yes, just throwing out the issues, which is very, very important. But this is very important. And because of the importance, you need to do more. A lot has been said about it. Energy security or climate concern. We need to see that as shown in the data. Data should be able to show us at what point is the EU concentrating on energy security, or at what point are they concerned about climate, and then the implications for Nigeria. You just said that there are strategic partners if we export our oil to them and all of that. They are major exporters as well too. And then we also, from our own end, I mean, everything should be data driven. We need to see this very, very clearly. Clearly. And that's why you can see the implications. So it's not something that is, as a research, is something that should be convincing, such that your conclusions or policy recommendations will derive from the research you have done. So it's not something you just read on the pages of some journals or something to draw your own conclusion. No, it should be based on your research. And because of that, since you haven't done an in-depth analysis of what we are supposed to do, throw out the data, bring out the data. Let us see how it is. And then you'll be able to draw specific, that's what I keep hammering on, specific recommendations that will be able to help policymakers. Because we don't just say government should do something about it. No, but we should be able to guide the government on what policies, specific policies to take. And that's how we can contribute our own little quota to the development of our dear nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, Professor Orwell Ntiga wants to add to it.
Okay, good morning all. Though I was not here when the paper started the presentation, but there are a few things that I feel that I should also share, from what he has done. When we compare, and you are comparing two things that, quite distinct. You have the EU, you have Nigeria. In terms of infrastructure, in terms of the human capacity, in terms of almost everything, we are not there with them. The only basis was that they buy our crude and they sell the refined product to us. That was the basis. We know that Russia is part of the EU, is still part of Europe, and they also produce oil. Yes, so, but if you look at their capacity in terms of the infrastructure, the human capacity, and the rest, when you are comparing them with Nigeria in terms of drawing policy, conclusion from there, there is no basis. But that to me is maybe personal, but it actually, because there are other countries, developing countries, emerging economies in the Asia like Indonesia and the rest, that are almost, Brazil and the rest, that are almost like they were at the same level with us, but at least they've done something. They said the Asia Tigers, they have moved from where they were to where they are now. That is core. So the basis of comparison, you have to concretize that so that those that are listening to you, we have something to also draw from there. Then, just as you clearly talked about data, I don't know, but with the slide I saw here, I couldn't see any facts that you are using to drive home your point. We are not journalists. So you have to back your argument with data. So thank you very much. I think that was some of the few observations that I have.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you for giving us something to talk about and to give feedback. Let's clap for Emmanuel, please. It's almost time for the plenary. Would be taking the last presentation, and it's a paper written by Benjamin Ajayi et al. And one of the co-authors is here to present. The paper is titled A Review of Different Energy Dispatch Strategies for Hybrid Energy Systems. Let's make him welcome. Please introduce yourself and then take 10 minutes to present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. My name is Isa Samailanite, PhD candidate with NAEE University, Nigeria. I equally work in the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. So for today's discussion or paper, we'll be looking at the review of different energy dispatch strategies, right? And then, of course, we're speaking to, okay, thank you. So, of course, we're looking at hybrid energy system. Before I progress, this presentation was to be taken by the lead author in person of Benjamin Ajayi, but he's caught up with some office engagement, so I'll be taking it on his behalf. Thank you. So, on this, we'll be looking at just what you see on this. Based on this outline, of course, we're going to look at the objectives of this research and then setting the context, and we're going to look at briefly at the HES, which is the hybrid energy system and comparative performance, and then what is the research implication for Africa. So now, setting the context, of course, just like I earlier indicated, we're going to look at this analysis based on the economic, the environmental, and then the technical requirements, right? And then we're going to compare performance across context, and by that I mean across socio-economic context, and then propose decision taxonomy for Africa. And then, of course, we're going to look at what it entails with regards to the African context. So now, setting the context, of course, we know that energy is instrumental for the development of every nation. And then for Nigeria, we aim to achieve net zero by the year 2050. And by that, it requires heavy investment, right? It requires heavy investment. So Now, the energy hybrid system, of course, is something we are all familiar to, and based on our sociocultural context or where we're coming from, each and every one of us is almost familiar with what the hybrid system is. Of course, the use of the grid solution with renewable energy, and then, of course, your generators, which is something that was a new tool with a typical African, especially a Nigerian. And then, now, we're looking at how to dispatch, how to effectively manage that energy supply and demand. You balance it up such that the excess supply you have can be monetized, right? And then by excess supply, it means you're able to generate enough power to transmit to the national grid, or you balance your load requirements with your consumption. And then based on the Nigerian context, of course, we see that we have several issues which has to do with weak grid, and that is the cause of the frequent volatility in power in Nigeria. And then you have diesel dependency, of course, and then high fuel costs, and then which calls for the need for a smarter dispatch system. And by that we mean a dispatch system that kind of recognizes the needs of the consumer, right? And this can only happen with the adoption of AI technologies, right? Technologies like IoT that is able to depict at a particular time the consumption needs of the household sector before it is then being dispatched based on the excess supply I've spoke about. So this is a typical anatomy of a HES, which of course you see your PV, which is something that is common, especially down the north. And then of course you have your wind, then you have your batteries, and then you have the controller, of course, that bring all this together, apart from the power that is coming from the grid. So now the policy implication, of course, is what can we do as a nation to address the issue of power inadequacy, right? So are we going to create policies that enables small entities, right, household sector, businesses, to be able to transfer or move their excess supply, right, to the grid? Or what solutions are we actually looking at? So now, looking at the HES, of course, and then you know the HES just speaks to having your renewable energy in place, having your the normal energy, of course, that comes from the grid, your generation power. So the question is, what are the advantages of having this HES in place, especially for a country that is grappling with the issue of energy insufficiency like Nigeria? So we look at, of course, the need to diversify the energy mix. Today, there are a lot of solutions like the rural electrification program, rural electricity program, yeah, that you find, like I know Bayero University, Kano, has been off-grid for quite a while. There are certain markets in Kano and some part of the country that are off-grid. So this is kind of diversifying the energy mix to reduce the pressure, right, on the national grid. And what does that do to a country like ours? In the wake of the energy transition, of course, we know that it's going to reduce the CO2, which is the carbon emission, and they help the nation achieve its net zero target by 2050. So, but above that, we know that renewable energy penetration needs to be encouraged, right? And that is what the HES, which is the hybrid energy system, is going to provide. And then for, especially, I spoke about the scalable for rural communities and school, which is already being adopted based on the government policy. Now, what are the barriers to adopting this HES system? Of course, we know that there is intermittent generation, weak grid integration. So when you kind of, you know, everything should be based on demand and supply. And then when you have excess power, you should be able to kind of transmit it to entities with deficit demand, right? So that there's a kind of a balance. But to achieve that, we know that there's a huge capex requirement, which is capital expenditure, right? So what do government needs to do, or policy makers, of course? Then policy makers need to kind of create an alignment to address these issues, and that's why today we have the energy policy initiative that was once chaired by Professor Osibanjo. I don't know if the current government is still pushing on with that. Now, looking at the dispatch strategies, this is a typical explanation to what a typical dispatch strategies that existed. Of course, you have the load following, and then load following just look at the demand, and then it matches up with your demand. So if you're generating electricity and you're using the load following you are leading the load following, what it does is it generates only what you can consume. And by that, you reduce the excess capacity or demand of your system, which is your solar system, your hydro or wind, right? And then you have the fixed charging cycles, which are simpler, which this is kind of whether you need the power or you don't need the power, it just keeps supplying the power to the batteries. And then state of charge, of course, is battery focus, enhances longevity. Forecast based is, that's why I spoke about the IoT. Let's assume the weather is going to be terrible in some 2 days. So what this system helps you to do is to be able to forecast the weather condition and then be able to generate more power to store against when there is a deficient weather condition to stimulate power generation. And then the rule based, of course, and then you have the optimization based. So now looking at this core, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of this? And then what can be adapted in the African context or in the Nigerian context? Of course, we know that there is a low socio-economic condition. Today, the average Nigeria, like about 120 million was reported to live under the poverty line, and by that, that is about $2, right? So now, looking at the load following, what does it do? Just like we saw in the schematics the other time, it is reliable and low cost, but it then stresses your battery, right? And then the cycle charging, of course, efficient energy use and fuel use. This SEO base, it's kind of protect the battery, may lead to curtail renewables, etc. So, but let's go further to look at the framework in which we can evaluate the HES system. Of course, you have the technical metrics, the economic and the environmental metrics. Of course, for the technical or for the economic, of course, we have the levelized cost of electricity, which are key considerations. You have the MPV, which is the net present value of such project that should be undertaken, and then the market penetration of the energy, the hybrid energy solutions within ecosystem, because that will determine whether if it is viable or it's not viable. And then you look at the environmental impact, which speaks to the renewable energy transition, of course, the reliability, the ramping rates, the efficiency, which the renewable energy are meant to kind of, and then looking at the technical, okay, sorry, there's a mix-up in this color coding. This should be, the third item should be the environmental, which is carbon footprint, renewable share, pollutant, and then the last, which is the technical, should be the blue, which is the storage, integration, and security, which is provided by the energy system. So now let's look at this heat map that I called, and then, okay, yeah. Okay, let's look at this heat now. What you saw, the green is an ideal case in a contemporary African condition due to the economic living standard. This is a decision tree that would decipher what HES, that's hybrid energy system, should we adopt as an entity or as individuals. And then, of course, the African context still looking at the low context, medium context, and high context. High context is when you have the high IoTs, the AI, to drive the effective dispatch of energy. And then, of course, what is the geopolitics of the HES? Of course, we know that it is marked by a lot of issues of lithium mining, cobalt mining, and how scarce these resources are. Right, which is, of course, affecting battery manufacturing. And, of course, we know that energy security is essential for what? For economic prosperity of nations, right? And so what are the opportunities existing? Of course, is the fact that we need to have microgrids, which ultimately result to energy sovereignty. And then, of course, what are the research implications? Government needs to come up with policies that encourage the adoption of HES system, right? So these are cultural policies, and not just that, we need to encourage the adoption of IoTs, but that will only come with incentives that can drive this change. So in conclusion, hybrid energy system is essential for Africa's energy transition, of course, and then we need to encourage the adoption of AI-driven tools and technologies that ensure that energy generation is efficient and serves the need of the consumers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give him another round of applause, please. You can sit down before the questions start coming. Yes. That's an interesting presentation he's given to us, looking at different strategies for dispatching electricity in order to optimize the supply from a hybrid perspective. I have a question I've written. Do we want to contribute or ask? Come and sit in front, please. You can come and sit in front here. Yes. Questions about his presentation, about the issue he has addressed, contributions towards making the paper better. Who wants to go first? Dr. Princess, you're smiling. It's fine if you want to go first. No, it's fine. Okay. Who wants to go first? Maybe I should start then. I have two questions for you. First is, looking at the recommendations you gave about AI-driven systems, I wonder if you did any sort of cost analysis that justifies that recommendation. Because if we're going to bring in AI-driven systems in order to optimize our hybrid energy systems, then there'll be a cost implication to it, isn't it? Good, that's my first question. The second question I have for you is the evaluation framework you presented, where you have the environmental, the economic, and the other, they intersect somewhere in the middle. What's common about that middle? Do you get my point? In the metrics for each of those subgroups, do you have common items, if you understand my question? Yes. If you put up the slides, perhaps my question will be clearer. You understand my question, right? Good. Let's take Princess's question then. Yes.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm Princess. One call. I wanted to find out that this is a very interesting topic you've handled, but you've taken it from a macroeconomic point of view, I might say. I would have thought that you would take it from a smaller point of view, like a case study with a small unit, and let's see how that works. Before you were going global, you were going Africa, and so I thought it's not something we can wrap our head around, even your conclusions. So if you take this study piecemeal, maybe you do a community, and let's see how that works. So we can have a conclusion that we can say, let's scale it up. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the concern is just like what she said. You have mostly the problem with the poor, especially the poor in the rural areas. You talk about these hybrids that are being driven by AI and all the rest. And, in terms of most of this infrastructure, there are things that must be there before even you can talk about, accessing electricity or power. And in the rural areas, most of these things are not even available. Is it just what could be applicable in the town, people living in the cities, or even in the rural areas? That's what I want to ask. That's my question.
Okay, thank you so much for the various input and comments. Let me start from the last person that asked a question. So, thank you for pointing that. So, of course, I was talking about rural communities because I think that's an area where energy deficiency has a very significant impact. And so now looking at the current status quo, we know that the Starlink has decentralized network access. So what this means is rural communities will be able to be connected to the globe, right, through the use of Elon Musk's internet satellite. And that's kind of a major background to having AI application, the ability to access kind of a huge data set and interact with the condition, weather conditions or pressures, right? So I think it is a step in the right direction. So what the government needs to do is to come and provide kind of an enabling environment to bring all the technical requirements that will instigate the effective delivery of the HES in rural communities. Of course, we know that Nigeria, to an extent, is a high agrarian society where we have a lot of farmers, people in rural areas depending on agriculture. We know the impact electricity will have on such communities. So thank you, sir. I don't know if I'm able to kind of highlight that. Okay. So for the context of starting from a micro level and then before we progress to a national or regional level, I think that's well noted. We'll try as much as possible in our next paper to kind of look at it from a micro level and then examine the impact and then, of course, see what it can be done at the macro. And then lastly, sorry, I missed out your question, sir.
Yes, should I repeat it?
Yeah.
So fundamentally, it follows from, I think Dr. Princess tried to zero it down to a micro study. So my question is, usually when I see recommendations, you recommended AI-driven systems, my question then is, did you think about the cost dimension of introducing AI systems in order to optimize our hybrid system?
Okay, thank you. So on a private scale, we've had HES that are driven by AI, even though mostly the cost, of course, is huge. So that's why you see the net present MPV as part of the economic metrics that was used. So in the meantime, we can say it is not economical due to the current living conditions in nations, but at least for high impact areas where that can be kind of insignificant, mostly in the urban region, that can be adopted. It might be considered based on the value-driven system, whether it's fair or not. But then back in the rural areas, I think it's kind of a difficult question to answer. We are still on a joining, and hopefully we'll get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have you answered her question?
Yes.
The question I asked about the intersection. Yes, I was going to tell
the
him,
intersection, yeah.
I was going to tell him to look further to it.
The only thing on the intersection is, of course, efficiency, right? At the center of whether there's technical, whether it's environmental, the key thing is there's efficiency, right?
Okay, let's clap for him. He's tried to respond to the questions, but that's something you should look further to.
Okay.
Look at it because I sense that if you can find the common denominator, that's the word. Thank you, Margaret. If you can find the common denominator amongst these three different subsections in your evaluation framework, it could actually be a novelty.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Not that I have the answer, but I think that's something that will be novel out of your work.
Okay.
But let's appreciate him. That's an intelligent piece of work. Thank you. For those who joined after we began, we're just rounding up the concurrent session this morning in order to go to the plenary. We have looked at two groups: technological solutions to enhance the green economy, and we also looked at electricity supply and the future of fossil fuels in a decarbonizing world. We have had two presentations and intersected those presentations towards improving the paper. I was joined by Professor Orwell from University of Port Harcourt. Please, let's make him welcome as we round up this session. Any other contribution or speaker, you have to wait to present in the next concurrent session that starts by 12. But I want to appreciate everyone who has joined us. Please put your hands together for yourself. We'll go into the plenary very shortly. Can I invite the presenters to come forward? Invite Dr. Meg to join us as we take a group photograph this morning. Emmanuel Ode and Samaila, can you come forward? Where's Samaila? Oh, please come forward. Let's make them welcome. We'll just take a group photograph and prepare for the plenary session. Dr. Meg, you can join us as well.